Okay, so today we are on the air for a 3,000 subscriber. No, it's not subscribers. A
Follower.
3,000 follower. Thank you, Geek.
It's
3,000.
5 minutes. It's less than 5 minutes in, so you screwed it up. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you. I'm interrupting again. I'm sorry.
We are on the air for a no worries. Yeah, 3,000 follower celebration stream. So that's good. And I've got with me three excellent leftists. I've got Lonely Wolf, I've got some random geek, and the effeminate degenerate. I can't summon their name every time like this.
Jonathan's my
Yeah.
real name, so you can all call me Jonathan or John or Jonathan Scott. Just so long as not Johnny. But even Johnny will be fine. But yeah, geek or random geek or some random geek. Hello.
So how are we all tonight?
Working.
Pretty awesome.
Oh, I'm fine. It's always lovely to hang out with you.
Dallas is fine too.
And how about you, Lonely Wolf?
Not bad. I'm just gonna mute myself every now and then if my bird gets a bit too carried away.
Not a problem. I mean, to be honest, the bird, it's quite a nice feature to have added to these streams. But
And if you hear background noises, that's because I'm literally actually at work.
Sorry, you both spoke at once.
It is. I was just mentioning that, like, since Troy mentioned his background noise, I'm going to mention my background noise because, once again, I'm at work at in the McDonald's live stream. That's going to be the common thing, actually, if I get invited onto these things or invite myself onto these things, because more often than not, if I'm at work, well, you want to stream, but that's fine. Anyway, now I'm also on caffeine, just so the audience knows.
Coffee, I'm guessing.
Oh, I know. I hate coffee. I hate the taste of coffee. And I'm in Seattle, and so that's so very bizarre because it's bitter, and I absolutely hate bitter. So it's energy drinks for me. Anyway, I interrupted Troy. Now, Troy. I probably should just mute myself because it looks like I'm going to be the interrupter of the whole stream. I'll apologize in advance and let Troy talk.
I just had a bit of a coughing fit then, so I had to mute myself again.
Now I don't feel so bad.
Geek says you were going to say something, Wolf?
I'm not sure what I was going to say.
Anyone ever know what they're truly going to say?
Very philosophical.
I guess, yeah, it kind of is like, because do we think before we say things? And what about the times when we just say things without thinking? Do we truly know what we are saying when we just say things without thinking, as opposed to thinking before we say things?
I mean, surely
I just said things.
Because surely, like, when we speak, we have to have had the mental thought of the neurons sort of processing the action, oh, you're going to say something, and obviously the brain has to say that to the rest of the neurons to send that to the mouth and the vocal cords and stuff.
But does that process happen quickly enough that it just seems spontaneous to the person, or does it take a while to register and that person can think, oh, good, I know exactly what I'm going to say, and then speak it?
I mean, it has to happen before, because otherwise the brain's in control of the body, isn't it? It's what sends the relevant messages to the various parts of the body. So subsequently, I mean, it has to come, brain before mouth. Otherwise, it couldn't, work, could it? Because your brain's controlling your body features.
Yes, I understand the scientific nature of the question. Of course, the messages have to be sent before it can be processed into words. But does that happen too quickly for the person to actually register what they're saying before they've said it?
Even then, I mean, you would have had to have had the thought in your mind, and obviously it may seem quite fast. However, it still had to have happened. You must have thought of the thing. If you interrupt someone, you must have thought of the point of contention or points of interest before you've spoken.
Yeah.
There must be a difference between people, or some people might not have the sort of capacity, because there's the thought, and then there's the what comes out of the mouth, but then there's that intermediate process where it's like the thought, and it's like, should I say this? And then that's the bit
that filter.
That's the step that often gets missed. Is the like, should this come out of my mouth? And then you restart the loop again.
And also, then, since you brought up that it's the brain that decides what to say before the mouth starts moving in order to say something, and I can sometimes think that like maybe that happens like so quickly that we are not conscious of what we're doing, or conscious of like we are just talking stream of consciousness and all like that. Sometimes some people, like Philip Moriarty, he can really talk at the speed of thought, and that's where it can get the problems and stuff like that. But if our brain decides what to say first, and then we start saying it with our mouth and stuff like that, can we control the brain? And that's a bit of a philosophical question, like, what is consciousness as well? I don't know the answers, but I'm interested in the journey.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, Philip Moriarty, I always, because I was quite a fanboy at the time when he had his when he was YouTubing at the time, his philosophy of physics and everything like that. So some of his work, it has inspired the way I think in some of my channels.
I mean,
channels? Do you have more than one?
Oh, sorry,
channels of thought.
Videos.
I mean, I can't say I've actually ever watched him. So I can't.
Sadly, I have not.
No,
yeah, I just comment on like the hangouts that he has done in the past. It's like the only things of his that like it's up on YouTube for people to watch and enjoy. But he is fascinating to me.
Tell you who I've been watching recently. I was watching Brad Jones, or the Cinema Snob. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh yeah, I love this.
No, I find his work.
I used to watch
Friday the 13th.
Sorry, Lapis?
I particularly liked his kind of. I don't know if you could really call it a review, but his commentary on Friday the 13th. Of course, he did it in his persona.
Yeah,
that was more.
Right.
I mean, I find all of his work pretty good, but my favorite has to be the religious films put out by the like really conservative groups who like they make all these films where it's like, oh, Christians aren't allowed to celebrate Christmas, and like the plucky hero is some like town mayor who like fights against the evil atheists and stuff. And it's like all blurred out of proportion, where it's like stuff that would clearly never happen in real life is like going on in these films. Like in one of them, a teacher like says to their student about like how Jesus was a carpenter and stuff, or something like that. And then one of the other students in the class like texts their mum like, "Oh, Jesus was mentioned in our classroom," and then the teacher gets taken to the Supreme Court or something and like sued. Just nonsense like that.
Wait a minute, is this the same group that did the Nudist of the Dead movie that like Cinema Snob reviewed?
I can't imagine. I mean, that sounds a little bit too extreme for this group. It's by a company called Pure Flix, and they make all these like religious films, essentially all like this, where some of them are like about the war on Christmas, where there'll be like the town mayor will like want to put up a Christmas tree, and then like someone's like, "Oh, yeah, you can't do this," even though like they could, and like no one in real life does this. And yeah, it's all nonsense like that, basically. I think my favorite one is probably God's Not Dead, simply because of the inanity of that one is just horrific. So in that one, it takes place at a university or college, I guess, in America.
Oh wait, I think I've heard about this one. Does like Kevin Sorbo star in it?
Kevin Sorbo. Kevin Sorbo is actually quite a good actor, but his political views are atrocious. But anyway, Kevin Sorbo is an atheist professor, or an atheist, and he's in charge of a philosophy class, and he makes all his students write "God is dead" on like pieces of paper before the class starts. Because that would definitely happen at a college, but you have to renounce your religion apparently. And the only person the only person who doesn't in the class is the Christian student. And he's like, "Oh, I'm not doing it." And the professor's like, "For the purposes of this class, you must pronounce God is dead. Otherwise, you must defend your statement in front of everyone." So he essentially says to the student, if you're not going to say God is dead, you have to write it on some. You have to like prove it to the class basically and debate me, the professor. And essentially, most of the film is based on that. And of course, the religious student wins. But the atheist is only an atheist because his mum died of cancer. And it turns out he's not actually an atheist because he hates God, which, you know, atheists don't believe in a God, not they don't like God. So we got that wrong. But there's like a dozen subplots as well. So the atheist professor has a Christian girlfriend, and he's horrible. Like he says to her, they have like an atheist wine tasting party. And
I did not know those existed.
well, they do now.
But this is make believe.
So
I have no problem with them. They should exist in the Christian wine tasting and the Islamic wine tasting. Private like businesses can do that if they want to and exclude customers. Anyway, but back to your point.
Yeah, so the wine tasting party. What do I say? They like all because the girlfriend makes some wine, and all the atheist friends like, "Oh, this is terrible." And then one of them goes to talk about the grapes of wrath, and they all start like chuckling to themselves, like like laughing essentially at her bad wine and stuff. And then at one point, she's like, "Oh, I'm a Christian," and it cuts to, like a shot of the atheist all like staring at her cynically. And then Kevin Sorbo goes, "Oh well, she's a work in progress."
I think you must. I mean,
don't worry, I'm going to convert her.
Yeah, I mean, from what you said, it must be inspired by some of these YouTube people. It's like, because I'm thinking of someone that we know in our circles that's atheist, but almost religiously. I know it's a contradiction of terms, but religiously atheist to such an extent. Like some of them, those edgy ones who've just discovered atheism, and they just they can't shut up about it. And like, I'd rather have Mormons knock on my door because at least you can offend the Mormons and they'll like bugger off. That you can't get rid of they're like herpes. You just can't get rid of these, you know, born again atheist types. They're just.
Well, it's bizarre, these atheists, like I mean, the friends of Kevin Sorbo only show up for that one, like the smug wine tasting scene. But by the end of the film, Kevin Sorbo is not an atheist. It's quite funny actually. He converts to religion on his deathbed because he dies in this film. Because the girlfriend breaks up with him, which, you know, good because he was horrible. But then, like, he converts to Christianity because, firstly, he loses the debate with the religious student that he was like belittling earlier on in the film. But yeah, he loses the debate, and then he like rushes to go and like make up with his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend. But then he gets hit by a car, and he's like dying on the streets. And then like there's these priest characters, and the priests like say, "Oh, this is your last chance to change your final answer." And he converts to Christianity on his deathbed. But then, like a few hours later, they're all having like a concert, and like they all seem to have forgotten he died, which is quite funny.
I forgot how I died. What happened today? Oh yeah, I died. I guess that happened. Anyway, how are you all been?
Yeah. What other moments were in this film? There's a Muslim family, which goes over quite well. So there's a Muslim student at the college, and she has to wear a hijab because of her dad, but they didn't like do it. So she's wearing a like head garment, but then like nothing else. So she's wearing a shirt, and you can see her arms and stuff, and she's wearing shorts, and like you can see her legs. But apparently she had to cover up her head. So, you know, they got that wrong with the Muslim family. But then the Muslim what's it called? The Muslim girl is actually a secret Christian, and she's like listening to scripture on a like iPod or something.
And someone rather large is in your comment section. Someone rather fierce as well. I think it could be a bear of some kind.
Oh, right. Well, I'll talk to him another time. Regardless, as I was saying, what's it called? bearing, because it made me lose my train of thought, or rather, you've made me lose my train of thought if you're mentioning him.
Sorry.
Not a problem, Lapis. What's it called? Yeah, the Muslim family. She's a secret Christian. The child, her little brother, like finds out, tells the dad, and then like the dad like beats her up and throws her out of the house. And it's like the only Muslim family like is abusive and horrible, and the Muslim girl also converts to Christianity. So you know, just in case it wasn't obvious, where they're trying to go with this. Okay, and then there's
Christianity for the win.
but it's not even good Christianity, right? It's like the conservative evangelical brand of it, where it's like if you're not a Christian,
Oh, the Republican kind.
Sorry.
Oh, the Republican kind.
Yeah, but even like stronger than Republican, to be honest, like the evangelical, like horrible sort.
Like the Roy Moore Christian.
What sorry?
Roy Moore Christian. That's what Lapis said.
Yeah, exactly. There's also a liberal like blogger who she tracks down like the Duck Dynasty people. You know the TV program Duck Dynasty, which you know be awful, but you know they get what's it called? They're big with conservative crowds, I guess. So they're in the film. She's got a car, but on the car she's got like stickers and what like they say like meat is murder, evolution will win. What else do they say? One of them says I can't remember. What does one of them say? Like I am an atheist, basically. One of them says, but then her bad thing is she's got a boyfriend, but then she gets diagnosed with cancer, of course. And later on, they have like a meal together, and she's like, "Oh, I have cancer," and the boyfriend goes, "This couldn't wait until tomorrow." The boyfriend.
That's
Sorry, what?
that sounds like a line straight out of The Room. And I just came back from the doctors. I definitely have cancer. Oh, come on, Mom. They're curing people every day.
It's unlike The Room. It's like, you know, well, I suppose it's like The Room. It's meant to be totally serious.
Yes.
Of course, the boyfriend's an atheist as well, so he's like horrible.
All atheists are evil and all Christians are good, and there's no complexity to this issue whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly.
And all these other people are not actually people. They're more of like extreme caricatures of the strawman version of what they think vegans are and atheists are. Oh, this smug and like sneer at, "Ooh, you're Christian," and stuff like that. Yeah, not surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's ridiculous. Like, and the second one's even worse because it like, you know, it's well, I don't know if it is worse, but it has the same themes of nonsense. So in the second one, like I said earlier, there's a student, and it's in a history class, and one of the students is like religious, and they ask a question about Jesus. So in a historical context, the teacher like replies saying, "Oh, Jesus was this and that, and it's written in the Bible that this happens." Like, and it's conflated with, "Oh, you were literally telling the child that they had to be religious or something." So she gets banned from teaching, banned into coming into contact with this child, and then taken to court. And it's like, you know, where's this come from? And then there's a plot. The lawyer who's like representing them is like this horrible, like slimy. He like literally he like is snickering throughout half of his lines and stuff. Like he's literally a cartoon villain. It's just these films are made by people with such obvious like agendas, no interest in the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't watched a film for a lot because I keep getting it's mostly series that I watch, and some of them are not very serious at all. Because I'm obsessed with this Netflix. What's the name of the show? Nailed It on Netflix. I'm pretty much obsessed with the show. It's like a baking show, reality show, but it's kind of a failure. It's like a big, you know, that thing where they say, you know, I saw this cake on the internet, and then they show this picture of it, and it's a really ugly version of the cake. And so they got these amateur bakers on, and one of their tasks was to make a Donald Trump themed cake. And the thing, it was creepy as fuck, this thing. it looked like this anorexic version of
Uh,
Trump.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh,
This is Red Fox.
Hi, everybody. Owen, I heard that you hit 3,000, and then I saw you around, but I never subbed, and I took a look over, and I was just like, okay, I'll be 3,021. This one's to you.
Thank you, Red. I'm
Yay!
sent you the link.
I did indeed.
You should have asked. You could have just been in from the start. I'm open to anyone really joining this. The sort of self-congratulatory.
Red and I were in like a graveyard type stream last night with another friend. It was a really different circle on what this one was. It was kind of a I don't know how we met. Dead Kyle is the guy that we both know because I've spoken to Red a few times.
Yeah, on Chair's stream. I actually was the one who introduced Kyle to Chair, and then Chair was the one that brought you on, and then I met you through Kyle and Chair.
I think I know so many people through Chairview. He's one of those. He's one of those dudes that like he kind of introduced. He's a gateway drug to a lot of people.
Yeah, I met Jeff Holiday and Copper Cab through him. So,
Copper Cab.
So I'm guessing, Red, your Conrad hot takes on Twitter.
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, you have one new follower at least.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So how did you come across my stuff? Did Lapis just introduce you to my account, I'm guessing?
No, like, just one of the weird things about Twitter is that it just sort of circles around, and like I've seen you in a couple of comments in terms of responses that you've had, and it's like, oh, okay. Like, just seeing names as I'm scrolling through, and occasionally they start getting more popular the tighter the circles become. So,
Yeah.
Well, brilliant. You're the 5th member of the stream, so the more the merrier. So, yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, we were just talking about what were we talking about?
God is Dead, a terrible movie that like I have heard before. You mentioned it because you were watching Cinema Snob, and like I love that channel, Cinema Snob, for like a brief tangent because I used to watch a lot of the Nostalgia Critic or the people on channel Awesome, but I kind of like, and that's actually really the reason why I started my YouTube channel and posting videos up in there. Just me, just going, this is an energy drink I just bought. I'm going to taste it. It's so and so, and that's it's seriously my earliest videos are still up, but I felt about a lot of interest in the channel Awesome, thankfully, and because that's when I started realizing that the site sucks. It's just the management that really sucks, not the people who post videos on it, stuff like that. But God is Dead. I heard of that one movie, that terrible movie. I think MovieBot put it in like top 20 worst films of the year that it came out because it's like a debate of like, does God real and stuff like that. And I think MovieBob also pointed out in his review, or when he put it on his like worst films of the year, that God never was in the debate either. So God did not prove his own existence. But as we established, there were a lot of problems with that movie too.
The debate though is like, it's obviously like one of the sides just isn't represented fairly whatsoever. So the atheist one isn't an atheist because they just like come out and say I hate God at one point in the debate. Their arguments are like, really like nonsensical. So the atheist is essentially just like quoting Richard Dawkins and stuff. Like there's no actual arguments and stuff. The Christian doesn't even like address half the stuff that is said either. He just sort of like starts yelling about how he just hates God and stuff. And it obviously is true because the atheist can't be like have any sort of substantive beliefs. And then
the Christian audience might be forced to think for themselves for once in their life. We can't have that.
Oh, we can't have the Christian sheeple to think for themselves because we are the shepherds and must lead our from the Bible, and well, metaphorically from the Bible, in a way.
And like they do such
people forget that. They must.
What? Sorry.
It's a difficult when you talk about religion. It's such a difficult topic to debate. Because with with the Poor Bastards, it was like with Humane Mind and a lot of the, and Ham and that they got completely different views. And I'm somewhat religious myself. Like one of the weird stereotypes. This is where I disagree with Philip Moriarty, because he made a list of all these kind of professions, saying that, you know, scientists, they've got a certain level of logic, but then mathematicians are kind of at the top of the food chain in terms of, you know, logic and reason and objectivity. But then the opposite's true, because sometimes, like, if you're into the natural sciences, you'll probably there's a lot of atheists in that field. But then if it's just mathematics on its own, people observe number patterns like Fibonacci number sequences or whatever, and then they sort of think, well, maybe there is an intelligent design. And some, you know, mathematicians end up becoming a little bit religious in some way. Like not necessarily a prescribed religion, but there might be some sort of spirituality. So I always see a little bit of intelligent design here and there.
Yeah.
So I do have a certain religious belief. But I don't follow a particular scripture or anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where the stonemason thing came from, was, I mean, realizing that there were certain patterns in terms of like mathematic designs and just basics that came through, like with observable stuff with, like, you know, the swirl and shells and stuff like that, where it's like they did start sort of linking it kind of to scripture, but not really. Because I mean, when you look at their history, it all came from a really old story back in like Old Testament times, where a master stonecutter was like, he was going to teach 3 of his apprentices, you know, the secrets to stonecutting, because they were almost master level, and they decided to kill him instead. And it went through like this whole procession of the cross thing. It's really interesting history when you look at it. Kind of funny too.
I mean,
And even
with my position,
even astrology, I'm somewhat.
No,
Because
you go.
I don't know. It's weird, this astrology part of it, because like at first I was a skeptic, but then I came across a YouTube, like a friend of ours, S-Man, like he's got another friend, Millionaire Man, and I watched his, like he did this astrology theories, and he was reading through these things, and it was so bizarre. It was almost like he was reading my mind when it came to I don't know whether it's a confirmation bias on my behalf, but it was very bizarre. It was almost like he was reading my mind in some. It was very uncanny. Yeah,
I mean,
I think he's like invaded.
Sorry to interrupt you, Wolf. By the way, Wolf, the sun is exploding in Australia. From the looks of it this week.
Yeah, it looks like the sun is gonna like come down and crush you, or it's just like cooking you right now. Are you in the death ray? Are you fine? Should we be concerned about that?
Oh, you've blocked the sun out a bit now.
Boom! There he is.
Oh, we had the Wolfian eclipse.
In regards to my views on it all, I mean, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in religion, or I don't really, not believe, I don't follow it and stuff. But I find it to be like you said earlier, Wolf, just the sort of vitriol aimed at it is so misguided. It's like you need to tie it into anti-capitalism, anti-hierarchy, anti, you know, these structures of power that corrupt the, you know, just beliefs about the spiritual world and stuff, rather than just aiming it at like, oh, you're dumb and bad because you believe in stuff I don't, sort of, but lots of people do. Like, what's the point in critiquing Christianity when, you know, ultimately you're just alienating people who could otherwise sort of get on board with better ideas? Yeah, you got to criticize the structure, and ultimately, if you're going to criticize that structure, you got to criticize how these groups with backwards ideas have power and why they are using their power in this way. And it comes down to capitalist ideas about, you know, concentrated power. Like, for instance, you know, you don't have such problems with evangelical groups in the US sort of dominating education and you know, social programs and stuff. If you've removed the wealth they've managed to sort of hoard and steal for themselves, you don't have Middle Eastern countries being run by, you know, monarchies essentially, if you remove the system that allows them to concentrate their capital and maintain their power over society.
Well, in terms of the Middle East, it's not necessarily the religious aspect that brings in the autocracy. It was actually American meddling and promotion of right-wing extremist groups that took away the much more
progressive.
progressive and democratic, and even I'm not going to say atheistic, but much less
More secular.
religiously. Yeah, more secular. The more secular governments that were propping up until the 1950s and 60s, when the United States and, well, to be fair, the Russians as well started meddling. So, granted, the Russians were putting in more socialism or more socialist-minded
like the Ba'athists.
secular groups. Yeah. Whereas the U.S. was just like, well, we can't have that. Let's start funding these warlords from the counties, like the far-flung regions. And the far-flung regions were the ones where they were like, well, they were the groups that spawned the 17 nut jobs that decided to fly a couple of planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. So,
yeah, that's that.
Well, exactly. I mean, Sorry, Lapis.
I said America created its own enemies.
Like you
I agree there. Yeah.
Exactly. You look at the ultimately those things come down to America trying to preserve its capital and trying to further its own wealth. So once again, it stems back to the ultimate, the system overriding it all, rather than just person X is bad or person Y.
And there you go again, going on your anti-capitalist bent and we must think of the solar system, must think of hierarchies. I'm kidding, of course, because that's what I love about you, is that like you always are hammering down on the being anti-capitalist and looking at the systems that allow these people to accumulate wealth. Just joshing you up. And then I broke your train of thought as well. Sorry.
No problem, geek. I mean, I think just with religion in general, people need to be more empathetic and considerate, and just sort of less have the approach of, if it doesn't harm me, then it doesn't harm people in general, then why is it a big issue?
Agree.
Like, who cares if Jim thinks that there's 5 gods and that life was created by a blob or something? Like, if it doesn't harm anyone else, then what's the point of just going on about it? Instead, focus on what's happening here and now. And it's like with religious groups you want to disagree with, it's important to make sure society is secular and society isn't being controlled by these people, but you've got to tie that into other theories and anti political critiques and stuff, and ultimately that comes down to one of capitalism, of power, of concentration of capital, of exploitation of workers.
Patriarchy.
Yeah, exactly. Patriarchy, cisnormativity, heteronormativity,
white supremacy as well.
Exactly. Yeah, all these different theories have to come together. Otherwise, what good is what good is your critique if it's not incorporating every element of societal problems?
Ableism as well.
Yeah, ableism. All the different elements of society.
For me, it's like
this may be a little bit of a weird take, but like, I see religion as something that can be a good thing. It can be a good thing. I don't think that it needs to be completely done away with. I think that religious extremism should be done away with. I think that people should look at religion with a mind knowing that God most likely doesn't exist. Like, that's more my take on it, but I don't want to see religion completely done away with. I want to see some of the power that religion has as a whole over society done away with. But when I look at like the pure and simple teachings of, honestly, the majority of socialist philosophers that I've read through, so much of it is just straight up lifted from the Jesus story in terms of like how we should be treating each other, how we should be interacting with each other, and how everything should be amicable and voluntary and sweet and peaceful, and not, concentrate power further up the food chain, up a pyramid. It's like, I look at that and it's like, Marx is preaching Catholicism minus Jesus and God.
Actually, since you mentioned that, I was on a Hangout. I was on the American Anarchists' channel. Rose has just decided randomly to have like a Hangout, and so she DM'd me and she DM'd the Vegan Anarchist. And the Vegan Anarchist on that stream brought up a book that they just read, I'm not sure their pronouns right now, so I'm going with they, Communism in the Bible. The Vegan Anarchist said it was a really good read, and so the Vegan Anarchist recommends Communism in the Bible. The author's name escapes me right now, but starts with Jose something, but Communism in the Bible. So that would be an interesting read for you to go with. And for my take, I'm going to take the label that my older brother uses. All right, someone else talk. Someone came in the door. Hey, Jim. Hey.
Hello to Jim from us as well. When he gets back. What was I going to say? Building on what you said, Red. I feel as though religion, if I'm completely honest, is something that would die down a little bit with the sort of breakdown of hierarchies and stuff as a whole anyway, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm not anti-religion. I'm not religious, but I'm not like, oh, if you're religious, you're dumb and stuff. But a lot of the time, people are religious because they need hope in a society that's quite, bleak and grim. And you can imagine, sorry, Lapis?
Opium of the masses.
Yeah, exactly. You imagine you're born into a society with poverty, grief, and you might not make it very far into life despite the world around you sort of improving. You can think, oh, why am I here? What's the point? And ultimately turn to the higher power of like, oh, if I slug it through this, I'll be rewarded in the end. And if people on the left like myself say, oh well, life isn't like this because of just it's inherently bad. It's because of bad systems that are in place around it, and the capitalist system ruining the lives of workers to make the wealthy wealthier and stuff. Mm-hmm. It can sort of like, if that came to fruition, it would lower the amount of religious people, I'd imagine. Having said that, if people want to believe there's a higher power, then so be it. I don't think it's something that is inherently negative. Like you said, Fred, it's people corrupting said messages for their own needs, which again can be seen as a form of capitalism, of accruing more capital, of maintaining social class.
Although I think there is something to be said about some people's atheism. Like I'm fine in general with atheism. I think it's actually, I agree with atheists on most issues. My problem tends to be more with the new atheists, since I think they weaponize atheism into a weapon of colonialism. They say, because the West is superior and secular, that justifies our intervention, because only we can civilize these people who are following backwards religion.
That puts Dawkins in a whole new light right there. But that also completely explains, I'd rather say, surface level people who ended up becoming quote unquote a face of the movement, at least in terms of like the social media sphere of it. People like TJ Kirk, who, like, you look at him and it's like, he may talk, atheism, but it's not atheism, it's anti-theism.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's very surface level without a very deep argument as to why you should be an atheist or an anti-theist. It's just like everybody else was saying before, well, you're just stupid if you follow religion. Oh, by the way, subscribe to my Patreon and buy my merch.
It's so much of it is sorry, Lapis?
And agree with me on everything.
So much of it is comprised of like dog whistles there and stuff as well. It's no wonder, the far right have had such an easy time co-opting a lot of these people into their own movements, because, when they're taught not to, think logically, but just to, hate and to think, oh, you're dumb, therefore I've got intellectual prowess and I'm so great and stuff. It's no wonder then that, like you said, Lapis, the ideas of colonialism set in, that, oh, we need to educate these people. We need to, take control and sort of teach them the right way. And, from there, it's quite easy to see how the ideas of, oh, our culture is better than theirs, our race is better than theirs. And quite ironically, people who are, taught that they're the best and, taught that, oh, our way is superior to everyone else's, then ends up less skeptical, less logical, and just accepting what they're told. Hence,
that's why you see so many cultural Christians among the new atheists.
Cultural what?
Cultural Christians, like Richard Dawkins. He identified.
Yeah.
Cultural.
And what I was going to say was like, about like racism. You look at the number of them who are race realists. Just people who are just talking about Nazi eugenics, just given a new name basically. But they've not done any research into it. So it's like, we can just spread all these messages into society. Let's think about the other stuff. They think the idea of there's inherent gender differences between men and women, and it's like, well, here's what research is that based on, other than just men are this and women are that, which is just the same stuff you could have found 200 years ago. In some religious institutions like old teachings and stuff. These people don't realize that they're becoming essentially a group of fanatics crowding around backwards leaders just by sort of not realizing that just being an atheist isn't a brilliant idea.
Because you've got to read because you read the comment sections, like not that it has to be a direct link, but I guess that there probably comes a time that if you're reading your comments and you're getting sort of intelligent comments and interesting contributions to the discussion, then you think, okay, maybe I'm thinking, yeah, it's kind of good in that way. But then when you're seeing nothing but crap in the comment section, the same things over and over again, it's like, I identify as an attack helicopter. That whole thing about people identifying weird things like I'm a attack helicopter or whatever, and then the same thing, over and over again. And it's just this the comments that are there, and it just goes against any sort of intellectualism or any quality discourse. And that might be a sign that you're kind of going down a path that's not so, enlightened or nuanced.
Indeed. And these people, like, they're upholding these structures of inequality and injustice. And then when you point that out to them, they're like, oh well, no, I'm not, I'm just an atheist. Not realizing they sort of co-opted this crowd mentality, and subsequently, that's how far-right groups have made such inroads with these communities, have managed to get their own people and people adjacent to their groups at the top of this community. And then obviously when you critique that, they only rally around them more by saying, oh, we're not like that, we're not that bad, just a whole a circle of self-perpetuating anger and unabashed hatred.
You brought up the joke about identifying as an attack helicopter. Now, jokingly, whenever I see that, like people say, like, "Oh, I'm an attack helicopter," I just respond with, "Okay, I'm an Mi-24 Hind."
Just like respond back. Oh, no, you miss species me. You miss machinist me. I'm actually like a tank, an M45. Come on, get it right. Don't you recognize I'm a Comanche helicopter, not an attack helicopter. Don't you know your helicopters?
The joke of it is like
on the platypus.
An Mi-24 Hind. It's like when you think of a Russian helicopter, you're thinking of the Mi-24 Hind. Like that big monstrosity with the bulbous double canopies and all of the guns and rocket pods. And even then, it could still carry like 20 people in the back. Those are amazing helicopters. I fucking love them. The Soviets made some awesome technology.
Yes. Although,
I mean,
quite bad in other areas, of course.
Well, yeah. So socially,
the
they
government,
weren't bad, but... Yeah, the government kind of sucked too, to be honest.
What was I going to say? The whole like the if you're non-binary, then I'm a helicopter. It's like upon even the most basic of analysis, it's such a ridiculous line that's only said by bigots really, because they've not thought about the ideas of the body. They've not sort of studied more into basic biology, and ironically, is perpetuated so often by these people who like insist I'm rational, I'm skeptical, I'm an atheist.
And yet some of these atheists and skeptics kind of like buy the stuff that Jordan B. Peterson talks about, and yet that guy's a fundamentalist Christian, essentially.
I mean, I don't. He's so,
Peterson makes my head hurt.
Peterson just, he's not. Like, I don't pay attention to him really at all because what does he have to say? What does he have to say that's any different from any other one of these, that's fascists, basically?
I mean, it's important. It's important to clean one's room and eat lobsters.
The thing with Jordan Peterson, which so attracts a lot of these people, is that he phrases common socially conservative talking points in pseudo-intellectual jargon, which is very appealing for Christian conservatives who are entering the academia and who don't want to question their beliefs. Instead of embarking on a more fundamental critique when they're learning about all these new ideas, they retreat into the safety. Jordan B. Peterson, who essentially is going to tell them the philosophical equivalent of nursery rhymes.
Yeah. And one thing I laughed, and this is one thing that I really strongly noticed with Peterson, even though he wraps up a lot of his stuff with a lot of pseudo-intellectual jargon, he's not really saying anything at all.
Yeah, exactly.
That debate against the, what was it? I forget if she was Canadian Broadcast Group or BBC presenter or whatever. That was like 20-some minutes long. He didn't say. I think it was Kathy Newman. He didn't say anything the entire time.
That was a terrible interview because she did such a shitty job at doing the interviewing, and then
it was
I'm
like,
not sure what he was talking about, but it was just a shit fest. Like they both, I'd throw both of them in the gulag.
Honestly, it was like watching Sargon versus Thomas Smith at MythCon again, and I was like third row for that, and I'm just sitting there like, both of you are being complete morons. Thomas, you already won. Move on from this talking point. Ask him something else.
That is a fair criticism.
Sorry?
That's a fair criticism of Thomas Smith, but I think Thomas Smith right there was the debater, but also the debate moderator, and also the crowd, the MC essentially. So he had three roles to perform on that stage, and he was not prepared for the kind of audience that came to MythCon that year, because he was prepared to for a simple discussion between him and Carl Benjamin, but then to see the crowd react to the tweet of content warning, I wouldn't even rape you, and how they cheered for that, and what Carl Benjamin pointed to the crowd, said, yeah, you are my people, and stuff like that. He was just not prepared for that kind of audience, which is why he said to the audience, you guys are disgusting for cheering at a tweet that says, I wouldn't even rape you. And so I can see your criticism of Tom Smith. He was hammering on the same point. It wasn't going anywhere. That's the fair criticism of Tom Smith's performances. But I, in some regards, have a bit of sympathy for Thomas Smith in the position he was put in on that stage. And also he was asked, you had to stay on stage until 2:40 or something like that. He was asked to perform 30 more minutes or 20 more minutes than he was promised. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes of that. So there was a lot there. And I don't always agree with Tom Smith either. He can blame people who were third-party voters that's why Trump won, because you didn't vote for Hillary. And some people,
Hillary Wheaton. At least I can agree with Bering on Will Wheaton being a bit of a nothing.
Will Wheaton is a douche, and Will Wheaton is a douche, and honestly, so is Shia LaBeouf. Both of them are.
I can agree with Shia LaBeouf. There's
my whole opinion of them is they're not really that important to the whole conversation. I find
that's fair.
One thing that annoys me is when people focus on people who are left wing who hold you know, maybe the odd questionable view, like, or they don't present themselves, or maybe not even left wing people, like liberals, really,
Yes, liberals
who have
mostly.
the, you know, not the best way of speaking about it. It's like, yeah, fine, they're a bit annoying, but what's the bigger issue here? You know, we've got a fascist in government doing horrible things against queer
Yes.
people, deregulating the economy, ramping up colonialism. You know,
He's about
and
he's
what?
about to
Oh,
put a
Although,
Shia
to be fair, to be
Shia
absolutely fair to Trump, these
Sorry,
are
Lachlan?
policies of the American government for the past like
Yes.
40 years.
Like,
yes.
Trump is
it's just,
maybe a further step along the path, and he is
Mhm.
uglier rhetoric, so it's more obvious that these horrible systems exist. That's why you're having so many people in the liberals in the 2016 election be like, oh, I didn't realize racism and classism were such big problems, but now
No,
that Trump is elected, I see everything.
Yeah.
like, you know,
some people were legitimately blind to that. Some people were legitimately blind to that. So it was it's unfortunate that it has to be like Trump to get them to wake up to that. But yeah, that was. But I do agree with you, Lapras, that like Trump is not the problem; he's a symptom of the problem.
Yeah.
And he's about to put might put another justice on the Supreme Court. And yeah, but yeah, someone else can talk. There we go.
I'm gonna say this. I grew up in a pretty big city in terms of the United States is considered. Average population in terms of like daily people in the city, about 1.5 million. So pretty big, especially considered like how big America is, and like you spread the population out. And Milwaukee was a big city. We'll put it that way. Maybe not top 10, but top 20 big cities.
I'm in Seattle, so we're probably about like in the same place population wise.
Yeah, but you guys had Nirvana. We just had Violent Femmes come from us. So
Tell me more about
but we gave the world Kenny G, so we still have to apologize for that.
yeah, and we had what's his name, like to eat gay black kids. Got shanked in prison within 2 weeks of being sentenced.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, anyway, Wisconsin is known for its cannibals. Like, that's what we're known for. But, like, when I grew up in NPS. We had a lot of Mexican kids, a lot of African-American kids. Like, it was really, really mixed, and everybody just got along. Like, nobody gave a shit. Like, I went to school with Jewish kids. I went to school with Hmong kids. Nobody gave a shit. We were just there. And we all befriended each other. We didn't care. Like, it was a non-thing. But that was the 90s, and I don't know if it was just like the nostalgia of it being childhood that was just invisible to everyone, where nobody cared. But it's like I sit back and I look at things now, and as an adult, pushing 30 here in a couple of short years, I'm like, I look at the way that some of our parents were reacting to like the friendships that we had, and it's like, this has always been a problem. And I mean, people like in quote unquote my age group or our age group or whatever, who are like looking back so nostalgically on the 90s and our childhood, saying, oh yeah, racism was never a problem then. No, it was a problem. We just didn't see it because we were looking at it through, the childhood lens. Like, if you look back at it, like without those rose-tinted glasses at the sort of things that your parents were saying or your friends' parents were saying about you,
Yeah.
it was always there.
Yeah, actually the 90s were an extremely like racist decade, like the 80s too, but like,
I mean, the late 90s became a bit more kind of, it went through, it was a very nice period when it was like the late 90s was kind of a nice, because it seems to move in cycles a lot of the time. Like, that was kind of a nicer period. Once it got to the late 90s, people were a bit less uptight about gender and homosexuality, and that at least in my neck of the woods anyway.
That was starting in the United States around that same point in time. I mean, that's when he had the start of a lot of the emo alternative rock groups and punk groups or whatever that were really starting to sort of break down at least things in terms of gender expression. Maybe not necessarily with pronoun usage and the start of transition and everything. But I mean, when you look at 1999's The Matrix, the character Call was originally written to be trans. She was supposed to be a female in the Matrix and a man in the real world.
Yeah.
So
Also,
instead, they just made Call androgynous in both.
Yeah. Aren't the Wachowskis both transgender?
Yes, they both are.
Yes, they are.
They're both trans women, aren't they?
Yeah, they're both women now.
Yes, both of them have transitioned.
Mm.
Lana did first, and then I forget the other sister's name now. I can't even remember their original names, which is, I guess, a good thing.
Mm.
But
Oh,
I mean,
they're out there.
speaking of celebrity transitions, I'm also a fanatic of cars. I love cars. I love car history. I also love gun history and military history.
Car history. Oh, so like
Yeah.
like
So,
you know, Lamborghinis and stuff and Mercedes.
Yes.
So you're a NASCAR kind of girl.
So back in 1990, or back when Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, was in the Olympics, was when they were designing the Mustang that was released in 1994. One of the designs for that next generation Mustang was named Bruce Jenner because it was too effeminate to be a man's car.
Well, isn't that ironic?
Well, here's the great thing. That's the design that won out the competition and became the 1994 to 1998 Ford Mustang. So, the Ford Mustang is technically trans. I know that's stupid.
Hey, people like owners of cars and like boats and stuff like that gender their vehicles anyway. It's like boats are usually, I don't know, women. Oh, like the Star Trek Enterprise. Kirk has says, I only got one woman in my life, and it's the Enterprise.
Yep.
So does that mean that Kirk was cheating on like the Enterprise every week on the original series?
No, he had an open polyamorous relationship.
Oh, okay, so yeah. Hey, look how progressive that in the series from the 60s was.
Hey, they had the first interracial straight kiss, and even if you look down the line, they also had the first televised lesbian kiss.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when was that? Like the 90s?
Yeah, that was 97 or 98.
So that would have been Next Generation with like Picard.
No, it was DS9.
DS9, the best one, the best series, the best Star Trek series, period. I haven't seen Discovery to compare.
Well, I haven't seen Discovery yet either, but I loved DS9 because they had to sit around and see the consequences of their actions.
I mean, I don't know, and I don't know much about Star Trek really. So
Steve Shives has actually a pretty good series about it. It's like the one bit of that he's made that I will actually sit back and enjoy watching.
What else has Steve Shives made? Oh, I know.
I'm friends with Steve Shives, though.
So, my first Twitter account is not blocked by Steve Shives. My sock that I misspelled my name on, that I used to get around watching things on Twitter, that isn't blocked by... No, that one is blocked by Steve Shives. And my main account, which I still use, was blocked by Steve Shives within 10 minutes of me making it.
sorry,
because I followed Sargon.
Well, there's that.
I mean, to be fair to Steve, I mean, I think people take like they overreact him far too much. He's, firstly, he's a really nice person. Secondly, he blocks people not because like, oh, he hates everyone, but the amount of abuse he receives online is like ridiculous compared to like people like literally made a documentary about him, about how he turned SJW and how bad he is supposedly, like that, and they his wife appears in some of his videos, so they make her out to be this like evil person as well. They go after him ridiculous. So and plus no one is obligated to interact with anyone, and obviously people who haven't done anything wrong get caught up in his blocks, but
Tim Blake was blocked by Steve Shives because it was just a block bot, but like Tim Blake mentioned like reach out to someone that Steve knew that there were mutuals of them and able to get unblocked. Mike Rollins does the same thing. He uses block box as well. So that's how innocent people do get caught and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I got blocked by ZJ even though I was dating one of ZJ's besties.
yeah, block box, isn't it? Hardly
Yep.
the end of the world. What I was gonna say, in fact, I don't think I was gonna say anything.
I'm not exactly a big fan of his, but I understand exactly why he's got to use those block bots, because even followers, like, not because I just watched one of his videos and I left a comment that was, I actually disagreed with what he said. I just said I slightly disagreed, but because I didn't disagree, because I wasn't being obnoxious about it. Like, some person, they came in there and they like, no one's ever spoken to me like that before. They said, you know, your whore of a mother should have aborted you when you were born, you useless cuck. And this vitriol, and I was just like, whoa, calm down.
That ain't cool. Also, I'm looking at the time, and I realize I have to go make dinner for all my roommates, so I have to go. I'm sorry.
Well,
Hey, it's a pleasure talking to you.
yeah, lovely meeting you.
It was wonderful meeting you.
Could follow her channel, Red Fox.
Yes, you're going to get a new sub. You're going to get a new follow.
RedFauks. Red Fox. Look it up.
Nope.
Follow it. It's
WRED FAWKS. It's going to recommend Weed Fox, and then Fox is in like Guy Fox. That's a completely different channel. Do not follow that. It is some bullshit.
Well, yeah, lovely meeting you, and yeah, go and follow her.
Wonderful meeting you as well. And hey, I'm going to be streaming on my channel on Friday, so there's going to be an invite for all y'all to come join that. Probably going to be discussing something along the lines of Star Wars. So,
see you around. Bye.
Bye. Where's the fucking hang up button?
Oh, that was a pleasant surprise. And win-win. On the topic of Star Wars, I'm sorry to oh, you're muting yourself, Geek. Yeah, I think we heard a bit of your like background noise and stuff. So yeah, and now he just said yep, even though he's muted. So on the topic of Star Wars, it's and actually combining that with what Wolf was saying about how people are often quite rude about Steve Shives and to Steve Shives' fans and stuff. Conduct online can be so unpleasant and miserable that it's not a surprise. Most people don't just block lots of people, to be honest, in general, to be honest, because you look at the way people speak online and they think that just because they aren't directly in front of someone, they can just act in any way they like. And subsequently you see people say what they said to Wolf. You see people, like in my I've got a big folder full of screenshots of people who've left like racist or bigoted remarks underneath my comments, and it's quite a big folder. You only have to look at the various incidents of racism and stuff thrown my way, just in the group chats we're in, and other bigotries towards other people and stuff. And it's something that really needs addressing because it's not acceptable to be happening in the modern time.
Damn it! I just had a thought, and once I unmuted myself.
And then sort of when it comes to live streaming as well, it's just I wish there were more people who just put a bit more effort into what they, because some people just think, okay, I'll just gather as many people as I can. I'll just send a link here, send a link here, send a link here, and then they don't even realize, and then all of a sudden something probably horrible is going to happen. I mean, because you've seen what happened with Jaworski. I mean, it was very bizarre, the footage of him. He was sort of burning himself. He had a lighter on his chest and he was burning his chest hair, whatever. But I mean, that in itself was kind of interesting. It was like a train wreck, a guilty pleasure type thing. But then when you listen to what's going on in the background, I couldn't. You can't even follow a conversation like that because these people are just screeching at each other, and even though they're probably very like ideologically they're similar, but what the way they talk to each other and the way they turn on each other, it was just this incomprehensible screeching, and I couldn't follow what was going on. And I was thinking, is this what the streaming has come to? Is this what's popular?
Well,
you mean the Varsity Live stuff?
Yeah, he does. It's just the hateful ideologies can culminate in hateful people, and like you said, Wolf, just they can't even speak to each other. You're out sort of bickering, arguing, being horrible to each other. And ultimately, that's not a healthy environment for people to exist in. It's no wonder so many of these people are so miserable and unhappy.
No, it's good news for the left that at least these people who are very, very far right, at least it's good to see them eat each other alive. That's one. That's the only last thing I can think about.
Well, I mean, it's sort of natural, really, that these people are like this because when your ideology is about the whites are under attack by the blacks, women have gone too far in progress, we need to protect our borders, just endless scaremongering, endless fear-based politics, all this nonsense about how people have their place in society and how we need to preserve our culture and stuff. It's all none of it's about the quality of just the human soul and stuff. None of it's soulful or nice or particularly pleasant to listen to. It's all just this bitter, miserable rhetoric about how every single person apart from like white straight men are like bad. It's just gonna breed people who are miserable and can only speak in angry rhetoric and cynical, miserable conversations with each other. Hence, Warski burning his nipples and stuff on the stream just to get more followers who are exactly like that. It's just, what kind of life is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've made them. What they misunderstand about left circles is they assume that we all watch the same thing, so that we all sit there reading BuzzFeed and we follow every single advice, like we all watch Sarkeesian, and that's the assumption that made. But what they do is, I think they've scrambled their brains because they put themselves in front of all these. They've surrounded themselves with probably the low hanging fruits of any kind of leftist movement, and it's just because they spend so much time watching this stuff and then analyzing it and then trying to debunk it and then doing that. I think that now you're surrounded. Of course, you're going to end up being a bit bitter if that's what you're watching. I mean, because when you watch good content that you enjoy, that's really what keeps the brain ticking, and it's what keeps us going. But to make these videos, this anti-SJW whatever videos, it's like they're sitting through content they don't like, so of course that's going to be bad for the psyche. Like even we wouldn't really enjoy some of the stuff that they watched if we watched a whole marathon of like the stuff that they respond to. Like, I think we wouldn't really enjoy it, but I think we have the sense, well, I might not like it, so I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, I would enjoy
something. Oh, sorry, Geek, you go ahead.
Yeah, I would enjoy something that like I get to learn something from, which is why I actually do enjoy Anita Sarkeesian, because I did learn. For me, I did learn something from watching her videos, which is why I'm eventually going to say to my younger Gamergator younger brother, the Trump voter, hey, thank you for talking about Anita Sarkeesian in your blog post because that made me watch her. But anyway, go ahead.
What I was going to say was just that there's nothing wrong with watching stuff that's critical. Criticism is important. I mean, I, as a quite a left-wing person, and others in this chat, we're all going to be cynical and skeptical of the system around us. That's important. But the difference is there's more to life than just being cynical, bitter people. And if it's not got a purpose to it, if it's not built around making things better and improving things, it's pretty pointless. And ultimately, that's the problem with these streams. There's no real benefit to some of the stuff that Warski and his friends do on that stream, just shouting at each other, calling each other names, burning their body parts. Like, it's just, what's the point of that? Who wants to see that? And ultimately, it's why all these people are so unhappy.
Another thing is that another thing is that like people are nastier and meaner. The meanest and nastiest people are people who realize that they're about to lose power or privilege or something like that, and they will fight tooth and nail to the death to reclaim that perceived loss of power or privilege. And I think that's part of why these reactionaries and these people like Gamergate that are the nastiness of that is a perceived threat to women or females invading or queer folk invading their male-dominated spaces and stuff like that. That's I think another component to it.
I mean, that was a good point, Geek. But sadly, your audio was a little bit grainy during that. I don't know if anyone else did it like that.
I couldn't hear.
Sorry, Lapis?
I said I couldn't hear it.
Okay. So yeah, maybe it was a little bit laggy or something. But yeah, no, you're right. These people just their whole like idea is about privilege and not privilege, even how they deserve to be on top of society, and saying how amazing it is to be white men in Western culture, even though at the same time supposedly every other like marginalized group is gonna like destroy that, and how they're not actually in a great position. And because they're not talking about anti-capitalism and not talking about why people aren't in a decent position in society, they don't actually address any of the things they ought to. And subsequently, people end up more bitter and miserable having sat through all these videos. What good is it to say to someone, oh, the blacks are inferior to you, like when they're still at the end of that video going to be unhappy, miserable workers like slogging it through? It's like, it's not good. Which is why you'll often see a lot of these people on the far right actually end up swinging all the way around to the far left. Which is good at least.
That's what I think I've said this before on like the you see a lot of leapfrogging going on because I think there's a certain unnecessary steps. So what I see a lot of is people who switch from a centrist position or maybe a conservative position, and then they shift to the left. And it might seem like a radical shift, but a lot of the steps in between are kind of useless. Like going from, so let's say you're going from centrist to left, you can kind of leapfrog the liberal part of it because that's kind of, I mean, I don't want to be rude to liberals, but it's kind of, I don't find the point in that sort of position, because a lot of the stuff that the people, the so-called anti-SJWs, like a lot of the stuff they bitch about, it seems to be a very liberal position anyway. It's not so much a they're not so much criticizing the left even when they conflate those two, like liberalism and left, and that's the main problem. That's the explanation why so many people might leapfrog straight from centrism into maybe a further left position. I mean, I did that myself. That was my narrative anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think liberals, like, they a lot of the time they have they have some decent social ideas. Like they're not like overly believing in like races are superior to one another, women should stay in the kitchen or whatever. But they lack the political and critique to have any substance behind that, and subsequently end up falling into many of the bigotries and their structuring through their political rhetoric, or lack of political rhetoric, I suppose. Yeah. But sadly, in the system we're in, where we've got two default positions of liberal and conservative, which ultimately both support the capitalist framework of society, most people are going to start out as liberal or conservative, and subsequently, many people, unless you're in a more radical context, where you're in a working class environment, directly sort of in contact with theory, you might end up sort of starting out as liberal and subsequently not really having the awareness of the better, more left-wing ideas, and especially when your media is so overwhelmingly either liberal or conservative, it's no surprise that people go to like BuzzFeed for their news and subsequently only see that idea and like, oh, Hillary is the best and stuff, and this woman became a CEO, as the be all and end all of political progress. And obviously that's not good, but rather than just sort of chastising them completely, we should say, oh well, we can be better than just this. We can identify the overarching themes of the problem here and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, because sometimes, I mean, the when you find like the couple of there's only about a couple of politicians that I sort of think, okay, these people are really smart. Like the one that I enjoy listening to her at the moment when I hear her speeches, it's like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Like she's probably someone who's like emerged very quickly, like from like such a young woman, but very her position's a little bit more authentic than the establishment Democrats. And the problem is it's like a two-sided attack. On one hand, it's the Republicans who obviously are going to be opposed to those ideas, but then there's also the establishment Democrat as well. Like
the third way.
they want to maneuver because she's a threat to that kind of established way of thinking, like people like Nancy Pelosi or whatever, or even establishment people like Clinton's, like, you know, someone like that who's risen and like from the very bottom, you know, through the bottom up process, and you know, has obviously appealed very well to the working class and seems to understand the core issues that are going on, you know, and that's a threat to the people who are sort of comfortable in their cushy kind of centrist type Democrat position.
Yeah. The one thing I will say with centrist.
Lapis, just before you go on, someone's got a bit of an echo.
Yeah, I don't know what that's from. Certainly.
I'll try.
Is the echo still there?
Not anymore, because everyone muted themselves. Try speaking now.
Is the echo still there?
Well, it's not me. Wolf, unmute yourself, and Lapis, you ask that again, please.
Okay.
Is it still there?
It wasn't there then either. And now everyone mute themselves apart from Lapis and Geek, and then Lapis ask the question again.
Well, I have earbuds in, so I don't think it'll be me.
Okay, well, no, it was no one. The echo's gone.
So what I was saying is the thing with liberalism is that I think it's people who have a superficial understanding that society is in some way broken, but are either unwilling or have not been shown the proper depth of critique that is possible of this society. So what social problems become to liberals are kind of like these kind of like superficial cultural issues like mansplaining, manspreading, women CEOs, cultural appropriation. All these sorts of things become the only way that, because liberals do understand that there's some oppression, but because they can't actually understand how to remove these these systemic inequalities, they just focus on these obscure cultural issues to kind of make themselves feel better, to make themselves feel more comfortable, and to kind of get rid of the pain. I've talked to like a lot of my friends are kind of in this mindset that, you know, if only we could, you know, have more women CEOs, like we could get a kinder form of capitalism, or, you know, if only people could be more culturally sensitive, then we would have a kinder attitude towards vulnerable ethnic groups. And I think it's just, it's not deep enough. It doesn't really address the problems, and it doesn't demand collective action. It demands individual readjustment to correct morals. And I think
that's the problem with the glass ceiling. Like, okay, fine, you can smash a glass ceiling or whatever, but then that glass has to fall down and cut the people below.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut everyone off. I'll be back in a few minutes. Just got to do something downstairs, and then I will be back. So see you all shortly. Keep talking. I'll get
well, the cat's away, the mice will play.
Yeah,
that red
exactly.
flag.
What was that?
What did you think of my thoughts on liberalism?
I missed most of them. Like, I came back just at the tail end there on it, but
yeah, so it was.
Yeah.
Maybe give your thoughts then.
Okay, well, my thoughts are pretty broad on this, I guess. When I was younger, I was very militant in my leftism. And it got tiring. Like, I saw there was a lot of infighting that was pushing people away, and it sort of drove me away from the movement as a whole. And I just sort of, like, I had a lot of thoughts to myself, but I just kept them to myself, and I just went about my work and tried to do everything to the best that I can just to make it by. And in that time, I decided, you know what, I should try and rekindle things with my dad. And I think it was Lonely Wolf brought some of this up in terms of like Gamergate and voting for Trump and stuff like that. And I will admit, I made a really, really piss poor decision November of 2016. And I voted for Trump because I was parroting my dad's views, just trying to, build that back up. I didn't think that he would win. Like, I was seeing everything on the news saying, "Oh yeah, Clinton's gonna win. Clinton's got like a 90% chance." I was like, "Okay, cool. This is just gonna be a throwaway. It's not gonna actually happen." And like, I can just, on social media be like, "Yeah, so I guess this, that, the other, blah blah blah," and then slowly sort of fade back into the left wing that I was talking before. But no, he fucking won. I'm just sitting there like, well, I'm fucked. And everything was fucked. And like, I'd been outside of left wing and even just plain liberal circles for so long that when I came back and I started seeing things where it was people were just pushing BuzzFeed and they were just pushing Anita, I'm like, this is really superficial BS. And I also saw like so many of these talking heads that people like Warski were going against. They weren't actually in it for a really left-wing point. I mean, they may have been talking a left-wing point, but when you looked at their actual actions, they were still pushing capitalism and kind of right-wing bullshit. And I'm like, no, this ain't cool. So I don't know. I've got a really weird and messy opinion on it.
Yeah. Well, American politics are skewed extremely to the right. Like in Canada, our most right-wing leader passed gay marriage and euthanasia, for example, in our entire history. And it didn't used to be this way in America either. Like Eisenhower was, on in terms of social spending on that thing, he really carried on the social democratic tradition. And
FDR was one of my favorite presidents, and he was a democratic socialist. He may have been an imperialist as well, but
it seems to be more popular than what people want to think, and that's why the establishment Democrats are kind of threatened by that sort of thing, because it sort of requires a bit of a paradigm shift. I mean, firstly, we've still got the popularity. Bernie Sanders is still being talked about. He's still very popular, and now like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is like, because I'm a big fan of hers as well, and so I'm hoping that she'd be like a 2020 candidate or something like that. That'd be quite awesome, and like given her popularity as well. So maybe people are like, the general population of the left is more left leaning than what the establishment wants us to be.
Yeah, that's one of the things about power. Once you have it, you don't want to let it go.
I want to like jump in here if my audio is fine. First of all, it's just remember, I don't think like Alexandria Cortez is eligible to be a presidential candidate in 2020. She's only 26, if I remember.
Yeah,
and so
she
you have
won't
to be
eligible until like 2040.
2024.
Why can't we have a like 30-something president? I mean, she's like the only one who's spoken an iota of sense in the last 2 years.
Wait. I would say for me, my general thing about like liberalism, I wasn't critical of like the Democrats until I discovered far left politics on YouTube, and my window into far left politics was actually feminism, because my radicalization was in response to finding out not just like Gamergate, that event, because I was just like, I barely was aware of it. I was only aware of it through like mainstream media essentially, and like other people that I followed that were tweeting out or posting articles from Facebook that were critical of it. So I was learning of it through that lens. But then when I found out my younger brother is a Gamergator, that's where it's just like, whoa. And that's where I discovered H-Bomber Guy, and H-Bomber Guy led to Garrett, and Garrett led to a whole slew of like YouTubers. Eventually I went up onto like, I found Owen, and that's the sort of like pretty much how I'm now an anarcho-communist essentially, or at least an anarchist of some kind. Syndicalist, communist, it doesn't matter, as long as it's like anti-capitalist for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we've all got our own different prisms in which we're kind of looking at it. Because I think, so like with Jonathan and there's other YouTubers, it's through the prism of feminism. But I'm not necessarily a feminist per se. But it's like there are other, but there's still a certain element that I have in common with that. There's like a lot of issues I look at it through, because identity politics is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that there's certain people there's just a current distortion of it where people use it as kind of a weapon, in certain ways, and they don't use it. I mean, the good sort of identity politics is the one that is, it's nuanced, and like my favorite identity politics is these sort of YouTubers where they actually show the footage of these, crusty old white people who are like calling the cops on, a black person who's just having a barbecue or something like that. And that's like that's identity. That's my kind of identity politics, because, that's showing to the world that, this is a problem, and how uptight some of these, white people are, and how really sour they are. And it kind of punctured through. Even for me, it was kind of a bit of a wake up call. I was thinking, whoa, like, is this what has to happen for someone to call the police on you? Is this what people are really like?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Don't be surprised about the American racism. You go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, I have a bunch of like liberal friends, and most, like, not too many far left friends outside of like internet circles. But what I find most shocking is just how many like white people who are liberals, especially white liberals of like older generations, have really terrible views on race. Like, it's just very, very racist stuff that I hear from some of these people. And it's bizarre because they're progressive on most other issues. But with race, all of a sudden, I hear a bunch of like nonsensical right-wing talking points coming my way.
One thing I kind of laugh at, my grandma just turned 90, and one of my cousins ended up marrying a black girl down in Miami, and they had a kid. And she wasn't going to have it, but she was completely okay with me at the time being the gay grandson. And well, then she actually got to know, her great grandkid and her granddaughter-in-law, and all of a sudden she didn't give a shit anymore. And then not long after that, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm trans, and everyone in the family found out, and I'm sitting there thinking that like what my dad was saying, that they're all gonna disown me, is gonna come true. My grandma was just like, so what name do you want to be called by now? And, like, I even got her freaking birthday card like sitting on my desk right there, and it's written out to my new name, and I'm like, this is awesome. She doesn't misgender me at all. And I'm like, yay. I just wish that she would have sent cash instead of check, because the check wouldn't even cover the bus ride down to get to the bank that I use. But I guess I would need to start a new account up here anyway, so. Fuck it. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's what needs to happen. More people need to know more people that are different from them in order to get a personal connection, in order to see that, oh wait, you're not too different from me. So what are these differences that we have?
Yeah. Basically.
I mean, sometimes we underrate. You know when people say, I've got such and such a friend or whatever. But it is sometimes when you meet someone and have an authentic, connection with that, because that's why. I mean, because I know, because most of my circles, socially anyway, a lot of them are conservative or right wing or whatever. That's just the way that the dice have rolled for me in terms of my social circles. But it is kind of there's certain things you put out there, like before they wouldn't have even known what they didn't think that asexuality was even a thing, but now they kind of, it's commonly accepted amongst a lot of my friendship groups, and they just bring it up in such a nonchalant way that it's not really a big issue. And then because I'm also like non-binary as well, like some of them, like they might still have a similar view of like gender binary, but they sort of think, okay, well, I know this guy, he seems nice, and he's also this, so maybe I shouldn't be so obnoxious about throwing my opinion out there.
Mm-hmm.
None of the helicopter nonsense.
Yeah. I'll just tell them, like, no, because I love to meme, because I love to find memes about those things, like the really offensive memes about, you know, gender or whatever, because when it comes to anything that affects me personally, it's like I'd like to I want to make sure that I have a sense of humor about it so that I can come up with a better joke than what they come up with.
Wolf does have a point.
Yeah. Like whatever affects me personally, it's like I've got to that's the stuff that I want to joke about the most, and like I just want to find and they're quite funny. I mean, I know they're mean spirited, but I don't know, it still gives me a bit of a laugh when I read some of the memes that they put up there.
I'm glad you're finding some amusement.
Yeah, you may as well.
Definitely.
Is that
Yeah,
sorry if I'm being personal. So do you also identify as sort of like non-binary, sort of androgynous as well as being a trans woman?
Is this directed at Red Fox?
Yeah, Red Fox.
Yes, I do.
Okay, yeah, I kind of thought so.
So you're a non-binary trans woman, Red Fox?
Yes.
Mm.
She or they are fine.
I think I use the they. I've used that. I've used they when I've talked about you before, but that's all good. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because I find it really interesting when people share their profile pictures, because I see you see all these different looks, like these sort of especially androgynous type looks. Mm-hmm. Especially it's the idea that, you know, you're either transitioning to become a woman or transitioning to become a man, but sometimes there's an in-between type thing, and it is interesting seeing the because I'm a shallow bastard, so it's interesting for me to see people's different looks and like what they do with themselves, etc. And I've seen a lot of trans men. I've seen the transition, and like they're very like extremely handsome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd agree. Trans guys are pretty hot. Mm-hmm. I'd even argue that most of the trans guys that I've known and met are hotter than cis guys that I know. So that's just me. That's my opinion.
I think there's something beautiful about androgyny. I just love the way the bodies move and shift between genders. It's very...
Yeah, I mean, it's natural. I mean, and that's the thing. It's not necessarily. I never approach it from a scientific point of view, saying, because I don't even know what the friggin' science is when it comes to someone who's sort of the androgynous or non-binary. I don't even know what the science is or whether there's any justification. I mean, it could be against me or whatever, but it's more of a universal cultural thing, like the cultural anthropology and, you know, the archaeological records, the art, literature. It seems to support, you know, the premise that, you know, there is an ambiguity that exists, and I think we're only just starting to talk about it. Something that's very latent. I mean, it exists across all these other independent cultures, and, you know, I think we've repressed it for so many years, and it's sort of starting to emerge like that and
re-emerge.
Yeah, re-emerge, I guess, in some ways, and in the long term, I think that there's. I mean, I am a little critical of some. I don't agree with all other non-binaries. Like I probably have a lot of personality clashes with them, and I don't entirely agree with the advocacy that they sort of or the language that they might use, because I feel it's a bit too complicated. But
I agree. I would very much so agree on that, and that is a non-binary person. So
yeah, it's like what we're trying to push for. Because I'm thinking, okay, maybe like 10 years down the track, then, you know, they will become like the pronoun they will become like an accepted part of the English language. But if we're pushing another set like sie, zer, zim, and like a whole kind of expansive list, then in the long term, a lot of things get shaved off if they don't really have the utility. But
yeah, like fake beer.
Yeah, in the long term, there's a utility. I mean, it's like, because we can argue for now that there is a utility of recognizing at least, you know, a third option, and we can say, like, we don't have to have 76 things, but we can say, okay, maybe we can be satisfied with 3, and you know, in the long term, because a lot of things will get shaved off in the long term, and whatever has the most utility for society will probably become part of the English language and canonized.
Well, language changes and adapts, and it will depend on like what it takes hold culturally and collectively and stuff like that. So I can definitely understand your arguments that you're bringing forth, and I can, yes, it's always weird and different adding new words, and people are not used to that. So if non-binary terms, pronouns are becoming used, there will be a resistance to that. It's like, why do I have to learn new words? What is this? But
but that comes with every cycle of history, and then like 10 years down the track, we're going to, what were we even arguing about?
I mean, he and him and she and her were once made up at one point. So it's like the people that argue that like, I'm not using these made up pronouns. Well, all words are made up. That's how language works.
Yeah, like a gender ambiguity is like a, you know, it's a universal part of human culture. So it just sort of makes sense and has the utility to have at least one. I'd probably argue just for one. And like, I guess the criticism I have is sort of the narrow definitions of these different groups. Like, because I know it makes people feel like they're free when they've got all these different categorizations. Like there's this expansive list of how they can identify. But I don't know, like my advice to a lot of people is that let's say that there's like 3 or 4 categories, and just if you define yourself a little bit more broadly, and then that gives you so much freedom to just move around wherever you want. You don't have to feel like you're sort of conforming to this little box, because I think the more narrow you identify as, the unfortunately, like you may also feel a bit trapped as well.
Well, that's why the gender master list has like 1,000 different permutations on it, and like I think 80% of them overlap. So
yeah, that's my problem as well. And it's just I'm thinking, what are we doing to the public? I mean, if I'm confused and if this is applying to me and I'm confused, then I'm thinking, what about the rest of the world? I mean, the poor buggers, they've I'm not sure what they.
Well, not only the rest of the world, but just think about the people who are like trying to come to terms with themselves, and they're seeing all of this stuff getting thrown at them, and it's like
it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, it is overwhelming. Like, I mean, when I came into like publicly transitioning and starting my YouTube channel, because I wanted to start my channel just to talk about transition stuff, and like I just wanted to talk about like the hormones on it, you know, shopping for fashion stuff, and like I've always had like a lot more androgynous presentation, I guess. So like I wanted to talk about that, and was like, well, if you want to, you know, present masculine, you know, this is like this sort of clothing. Like if you wanted to present feminine, this sort of clothing. Like, and if you want to do some in the middle, like something in the middle, you know.
Or what if you like want to be like slightly feminine, but with like a hint of well, like I don't know. I just love the idea of these
mid-rise bootcut jeans. Just,
like just this. I love the diversity. I love the diversity of different clothings, and you know, I love the shades of gray. I don't know, there's just something so sexy about contemplating the shades of gray between man, woman, androgynous, over and over and over and over again, and in 1,000 different varieties.
I have 5, 6 20-gallon totes full of clothing because I don't have a dresser or hangers, and I look over there and most of it is black and gray, but then there's like massive splotches of color and texture, like this red velvet dress that I have.
I think that
it's incredibly low cut. It's way too low cut for me to wear because I don't have the boobs to fill it out. And if I were to wear my falsies, it'd be really obvious. And it's like, yeah, okay, no, I guess I can't wear that one yet.
But that's the thing. It just like, because I think you're just following, because you're making the right decision, Red. Because you know it just, because whenever I watch what you dress, it just looks right. It looks like you just followed your instinct, and it just looks you know, exactly
Yeah.
sort of what red is, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clothing is just like another form of expression, and that's for me. Honestly, my expression is I am some random geek, or so I wanted to like express the many different facets of my geekiness in the clothing I wear. Since the Mega Man crochet hat, sorry, I did not make it myself. I bought it. And since the Ponytron T-shirt that I T-Turtle or T-Theory or something like that, I don't know. But I have the similar problem where it's like I ran out of hangers or like a dresser space for all my clothes, but I don't have them in totes, which I should do as a reasonable, responsible adult. I just have them on the floor, eventually. But of course, I have to do this on air every time I'm hang up. My leggings today is again Batman, just like on like Owen McDonald's last celebration stream, but this time is comic book strip Batman.
Oh, good.
And
Okay, I'm glad you're doing this because because when we first went on air, I was kind of grilling Lapis saying, okay, can you walk us through the earrings? Okay.
Oh, yes.
I'm as shallow as fuck.
Oh, there's nothing wrong. Loving beauty, aesthetic.
Aesthetic is
Yeah.
everything.
Well, I wouldn't say
yes, you
everything,
got it.
but it is certainly important. It's something to be craved. Anyway, well, that's certainly a disagreement I'll have with you there, Memes. I kind of want to address some of these comments in the chat from Esper. So they say, I think you guys are exaggerating the newness of this. The reaction is not this way because of it's new. It's this way because of bigotry. Now, what do you make of that? Is the new influx of pronouns, you know, something that has broadened people's ability to express themselves and to explore their identity? Or is it something that has resulted in a shattering of identity and a result of people trying to fit themselves into tiny little boxes that are overly complex and obscure?
I think it can be a little bit of both.
Oh, yes, of course.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's entirely something all that new, because some of these I've been seeing floating around certain circles for a long time. At least in terms of like some of the gender neutral trans related ones, and maybe not necessarily the kin type pronouns, but like Z, Zer, and then she and her and that sort, where it's like spelled with an I as opposed to an E, or you know, with an X or a Z as opposed. Like I've been seeing that since, honestly, since I've been on the internet. So like we're going back as far as like 2003 that this has been like not a common usage, but a vague, often usage, at least. So it's not necessarily something new, at least in terms of like our culture, because as far as I can tell, like this has been around as long as the internet has been around.
Yeah,
and
I think
like
that,
when I look at where some of it comes from, too, a lot of it comes from like German and Greek language, going back to like their own like old narratives and old stories. So it's not new. It's old. It's just resurfacing. It's no longer drowned out because everyone's on the internet now. It's no longer a niche thing to be on the internet. You know, so.
Yeah, because I guess one of the explanations is because it could almost, I know that I'm probably using it very falsely and I'm probably making a mistake here in terms of philosophy. When you think of the Jungian type thing where people talk about perhaps archetypes and I guess a universal consciousness, like because the idea there's so many different cultures have like a gender ambiguity and it's sort of recognized in different forms and it's across space and time. So there might be something universal. And then I guess in terms of logic and discourse, like one of my explanations behind that is that with the so-called skeptic community, it's very much, scientifically based and they think, okay, it's either science or it's social science. Whereas, when we're talking about the complexity of gender or androgyny, it's not so much a deductive proof because you've got these people who are sort of claiming to be skeptical and logical and they're saying, I have to have a deductive proof, that this is a thing. But we're reasoning from a place of induction where we're collecting, all these observations. We're looking at archaeology records. We're looking at artworks, we're looking at literature. And and that's the way that my mind thinks. I'm pulling, you know, influences from all these different places to sort of craft, and it's an inductive process in which we're kind of going from the you know, in that sort of direction in which we're collecting evidence. And I'm not saying that I'm saying I'm going to prove that this is a thing that I exist. It's just like, no, I have a strong suggestion, like strong evidence that this is probably a thing. And that's where the miscommunication lies. It's that faulty use of thinking we can deductively, you know, prove things and the reliance on that. And it's such a narrow sort of imagination that people have. And, you know, maybe they sort of don't sort of have that cultural sophistication to go back through history and, you know, to look at art from that lens, or, you know, literature, and see that these themes have reoccurred throughout history and through time.
So I think part of that then comes not necessarily from like not having the time or not having the want to, it's just laziness. Because like I sort of come at this from a for a time reactionary anti SJW lens. A lot of it comes through just with laziness from, you know, just how swamped it comes, because like the talk got brought up earlier when the discussion was on Warski, about just how much content there was. And it was just a constant push of content and a constant stream of bullshit. And it weighs on you. And people just would look at that and they'd say, I'm not going to deal with actually looking into this. So, like, there's that.
Yeah. But then they expect us to go through saying, oh, you've misunderstood Jordan Peterson, so, you know, you should go and watch lecture number 53 at the 20 minutes in. It's like, I don't have time to listen to freaking all those videos. And I've got nothing against people like that. I mean, if people are fans of Peterson, they read his books and they thought, and if they cleaned their rooms and they've sorted their lives out, then, you know, all power to them. I'm not going to, I tend to not, I don't get too harsh on those, but at the same time, not really, I just found his work to be a bit dull. And yeah, like I tried reading his book, but it just didn't measure up to, like other authors. Like, let's say there's someone like, someone who's a bit more bolder, like, let's say it's like Camille Paglia or something like that. Like, she seems to have, and they were on the same interview together, but then it was like, I could see even she was kind of, had him sort of pinned down, and she was like this one woman. And I disagree with her politically on a number of things, but I think some of her books and that, it sort of helped me to come to terms with gender ambiguity, like especially given her own research on androgyny itself, because that's what Sexual Persona was a book on androgyny. And that kind of, so yeah, even though I do disagree with a number of things, it was still an interesting journey to go on. And when I read someone like that, but then when I go to Peterson, it just seems so dull in comparison.
Peterson is incredibly dull and annoying.
And that's what's ruined the humor. So, because that's the thing, because I don't find the anti SJWs, like like for all the stuff that they say, oh yeah, we need to not be so uptight and PC and all that, but I don't know, they seem to not really have that. They can't really take a joke themselves sometimes. Like that's what I've known.
The joke about white people are men, immediately they must get offended.
Yeah. And then I think Jordan Peterson, like the wholesale consumption of him has kind of led to that sourness, because he seems like a very dour sort of person. Like you don't hear him joke or entertain, and I've never really seen him smile before, and that kind of contributes to that culture of not really losing their sense of humor.
So
yeah,
I found Peterson through watching Theron Meyer. She had an interview with him last year or the year before. This was before I moved out of my parents' house. So it had to be at least a year and a half ago. The entire time, he looked like a cancer patient that just got the news that the chemo failed, the tumor is bigger than ever.
Yeah.
And he was just sitting there like, looking angry at the world while completely crushed at the same time. And whenever I see Peterson, I still see that. Like
I sometimes would not.
I mean, the original, like what brought him to fame. I think if it hadn't been for that pronoun issue of the Bill C-16, then
no one would have known him.
Really wouldn't
no one would have cared.
Mm.
Never would
Those
have
things
guessed.
that he didn't even
sorry?
do his claim. It's most
Yeah,
annoying.
and-
He lied about this bill, which
Yeah.
you know, added protections against discrimination to people like me living in Canada, and he basically said, "No, it's totalitarianism. It's Maoism. I can't use non-binary pronouns, and you could." So he's.
I mean,
just
admittedly, I'm very skeptical of legal intervention into. I think when it comes to sort of trans people, like he, him, or she or her, like the correct use of those pronouns is sort of like a big priority, and same with like safety and protection. But I'm a little bit skeptical of any sort of legal intervention into sort of a gender neutral or non-binary sort of character, because it's sort of something that we're sort of developing our knowledge over time. And I don't know, I feel like any sort of legal measure, no matter how small it is, I feel like it's kind of intruding on my freedom as well to sort of define myself and to navigate the world myself. And, you know, I just want people to sort of warm up to me first. I feel like if there's kind of a law or anything like that, any kind of legal intervention, I feel it's going to put a barrier between me and the rest of the world.
Yeah, like I look at.
But the bill was meant to like put protection and only in very specific circumstances, where it's just the government cannot discriminate against your gender identity or gender expression, and that was not for specifically for trans or non-binary people. That's for just everyone. Just that like trans and non-binary people will be the ones that be most likely to face the discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it added gender identity to the list of protected classes.
Yeah, it
Canadian
added.
Constitution.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Guys.
We should the Bill of Rights. Hello, Owen.
Yes, Owen.
Hello. I'm really sorry. I'm going to go because I'm exhausted, and the stuff I was doing downstairs took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. Hence,
Owen, you missed a good conversation. Sorry.
Yeah. What have I missed? What have you all spoken about in my absence?
We
just
talked
gender
about
identity, gender expression,
and non-binary pronouns.
What was the first thing you said, Lapis?
Liberalism, non-binary pronouns, and we also talked about Jordan Peterson.
Interesting topics.
Because I made on my channel, I made a video where it was like I just made up this. You know how he's got 12 rules? Like I made up this 13th rule, and I said like the title of it was, you know, no pudding until you eat your vegetables, and that was it. And then I made up this like bullshit story.
Sorry to interrupt you all. If I leave the chat, will it keep the stream going, but just mean I leave, or will it end the whole thing?
I think it ends the whole live.
It will cut the live portion at 5 minutes. And it will still stay open for us, but it won't be broadcasting anymore.
Oh, so well, I can't broadcast the stream without it. Without me.
Yeah.
So I have to be present. Okay. Maybe if I leave this running for a bit longer.
If you feel like you're going to fall asleep, I would highly suggest not leaving it open.
If you're tired, I would recommend just going to bed. It's fine. We can continue this talk another time. Or on private once the stream's not live anymore.
Sure, okay. Well, I'll finish it up here then, and then just leave the call then. Sorry for everyone eager to listen to these fine people talk about stuff. Yes, I'm exhausted. Yeah, thanks everyone for getting me to 3,000 followers. And thanks everyone for coming along. Go and follow Red, Lapis, Geek, and Wolf. I will put their channels and Twitters and stuff in the description. And I'm sure they will as well. And yeah, I hope it's been a great chat for everyone to listen to. And I'm sorry I couldn't be here for all of it, but these people are just as good, if not as better than me even. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks everyone for listening.
Don't watch my backlog.
Don't watch my backlog either, but watch my current movies or videos. I just posted a Let's Play of Final Fantasy IV Part 10, and I have movie reviews where I recommend everyone go see Won't You Be My Neighbor, still in theaters, or Sorry to Bond You, an anti-capitalist movie, and go sub to Summer and the Geek and follow Summer and the Geek on Twitter. Anyway, I'm done.
And Wolf and Lapis, do you want to plug your channels briefly? So
hi, I'm the effeminate degenerate. feminist, socialist, and overall decadent. And I hope you. I will be doing a response video to Roaming Millennial tomorrow.
Yay.
And
That
Wolf?
sounds good.
So I'm the lonely wolf. So come and join my den, so I won't be so lonely. So I release keyboard covers of musical songs, and I'm a very eclectic channel. I do like a few things like movie reviews, like poetry reading, cultural analysis. So it's a very eclectic place to be.
All for excellence channels and accounts. Anyway, I am exhausted. So I'm going. Good night, guys, and thanks everyone for listening.
Sleep well, Owen.
Go on.